What happens when the most winning pilot in star history has Ferrari in full career and the head of the team explodes inside? Today we unravel not only how and why Hamilton ended up in the gravel of the Holland GP, but also why his words lit a storm inside Maranello. The Vuelta 23 of the Dutch Grand Prix 2025 will be remembered for a long time, not so much for its visual spectacularity, but for what it symbolizes for the start of the Lewis Hamilton cycle in Ferrari. At that height of the race, Zandvoort had already begun to become a treacherous track. The asphalt, initially dry but with variable temperatures, began to show the first moisture signals. Small isolated rainfall, almost imperceptible to the viewer, but lethal for the slick tire, began to fall on key sectors of the path. In that context, the SF25 that Hamilton was led to remained competitive. He had shown rhythm on a return during the classification and consistency in the first measures of the race. Unlike what was seen in Australia, where the debut with Ferrari was full of strategic stumbling, in Holland Hamilton seemed to have found some understanding with the car. It was a day that promised redemption, progress, and, at least, a sum of significant points. But it was in Curve 3 where everything changed. Zandvoort is a technical and very demanding circuit, but Curve 3 with its pronounced pair and irregular radio has gained reputation of being a silent trap. That day that curve was ready to collect a victim. In full entrance to the Perrault, Hamilton drew an aggressive line as he had done in previous turns. But this time its right rear tire touched the outer white line, painted on an asphalt that, with accumulated humidity, behaved like an ice surface. The loss of adhesion was instantaneous. The SF25 turned sharply. Hamilton tried to correct him with a contravalant, but it was too late. The car was violently slid to hit the protection barriers. The contact was not brutal but final. That accident, although visually less dramatic than other incidents that we have seen in Formula One, was one of the most symbolic of the season, because he not only left Hamilton out of career, he also destroyed the narrative of a pilot who had promised to return to the top, now with Maranello's red on his shoulders. The silence in Ferrari's pit wall was immediate. The images showed immobile mechanics, engineers looking at screens, and a radio in absolute silence. There were no recriminations or shouts, not even a gesture. But the tension was palpable, because the error was not strategy. It was not a poorly calculated stop, nor a wrong order from the wall. It was a pure execution error. A pilot who trusted more at a point of the track that does not forgive. The official transmission tried to frame the accident as a consequence of sudden climate change. But technical analyses, both from Sky Sports and former pilots, pointed to something more complex. There was talk of an error of judgment, of a lack of precise communication between pilot and engineers, of an overestimation of the grip, of a trust that in perfect conditions works, but that in Zandvoort with light rain becomes mechanical arrogance. And most importantly, this was not an isolated mistake. It was the culmination of a series of small indications, of strategic decisions that were taken without total alignment, of a career management where the pilot believed to have a different reading from that of the team. All that, compressed in a fraction of a second, ended with car 44 on the wall. For Hamilton, that moment was devastating, not only for abandonment, but because it was the first real blow to its internal credibility within the team. The first painful memory with Ferrari. The first crack in a project that, at least until that time, was still sold as the perfect marriage among a 7-time world champion and the most legendary team of Formula One. They spent several hours after the accident. Ferrari did not issue any official statement. The atmosphere in the paddock was dense. The press speculated, analysts argued possible technical and strategic causes. But what everyone expected was the protagonist's voice, Lewis Hamilton. And when he finally spoke, he did so with the calm of who has lived 1,000 battles, but also with the crudeness of who knows that he has just failed at a decisive moment. His first words were cold, almost surgical. While climbing the Perrault, the rear was out of control. I couldn't recover it. He did not look for excuses, he did not blame the team or the car. He recognized the obvious, he made an error. But at the same time, his words distilled an emotional load very different from that of a simple technical description. Hamilton had been managing the race with his own strategic reading. According to his testimony, Undercut did not want at that time and made it clear on radio. I was just saying that we would probably have to try to do Undercut at some point. I wanted to go long, my tires still felt good. This seemingly harmless phrase revealed an important crack in coordination with the wall. While Ferrari analyzed real-time data and projected imminent rainy scenarios, Hamilton made decisions based on his sensations from the cabin. Two parallel worlds that, in Zandvoort, collided. But beyond the strategic aspect, which really shook the followers and the surroundings of Ferrari, was the introspective tone that Hamilton adopted in his subsequent statements. It has been a really solid weekend and I feel that I have made many progress, only in general, my approach and everything. Exit without anything is definitely painful. The media. Hamilton did not talk here. The pilot spoke that after weeks of adaptation felt for the first time that the car responded to his style, that the pieces began to fit, that his work with the engineers, the feedback during the simulations, the evolution of the setup, everything began to perform fruits. And yet, the result was an abandonment that ruined that advance. This type of frustration is not common in Hamilton. For years, the British has managed to contain his emotions in public. But his arrival to Ferrari marked a turning point. He was no longer the undisputed leader of Mercedes. Now he was the new member of a team with a recent history of strategic errors and intense internal pressures. Each gesture, each statement, each word was interpreted not only as a momentary reaction, but as an indication of the health status of the Ferrari-Hamilton project. In a more leisurely interview, after digesting the blow, Hamilton was even clearer. "I am sad for the team. As I said, I really wanted to get those points for them today, and honestly I felt that I had the rhythm of the cars that were in front of me." This statement condensed what many analysts were already beginning to suspect. Hamilton was not seen as a secondary actor in this story. It was considered, since the second important grand prize of the season, as a legitimate applicant to the podium, as a real threat to McLaren and Mercedes. And even more, like the leader Ferrari needed, not the pilot who had to adapt passively to what the team decided. What makes this confession even more powerful is the contrast with the narrative prior to the beginning of the season. Many thought Hamilton arrived in Maranello to close his career, to fulfill a romantic dream of red dress and contribute experience. But these words show a very different truth. Hamilton did not come to Ferrari to retire. He came to win. And every error, every abandonment, every badly executed decision weighs doubly when one has that ambition in the head. His silence after the accident lasted little, but what he said in that brief period changed the perception of his stage in Ferrari. He is no longer just a champion who adapts to a new car. He is an injured competitor, determined to turn the page, but aware that he can't do it alone. And that conscience will be key in whatever comes. Because if something was clear after his statements, it is that Hamilton does not give up. But also, he is not willing to tolerate structural errors without raising his voice. Frédéric Vasseur, Ferrari team leader, appeared before the media with the unalterable face. He defended Hamilton in public. He talked about changing conditions, of climatic unpredictability, how risky it is to judge a pilot when the track is at the limit. His words were diplomatic, measures, perfectly calibrated to avoid opening a media crack. But those who know Vasseur know how to read what he doesn't say. Some engineers have already begun to filter, anonymously, that there was disagree with the pilot during the critical window before the accident. That the data suggested a change of tires, a more conservative boxes entry, but that Hamilton insisted on its personal reading of the asphalt state. There is no talk of disobedience, but of increasing autonomy that, if it does not align with the vision of the team, can lead to a structural problem. And it is not the first time that Ferrari faces a leadership conflict between pilot and directive. Recent history is full of similar cases. Vettel questioning strategies, Leclerc frustrated by bad decisions, signs suggesting changes of technical direction. Ferrari is no stranger to internal turbulence. But what makes this case different is that it involves a pilot whose presence transcends the sports. Hamilton, even in defeat, generates narratives, moves media, conditions decisions. And that, in an ecosystem as controlled as Ferrari's, can become a double-edged sword. Is Vasseur strong enough to contain it? Or has this accident opened the first crack in a relationship that, until now, was presented as harmonious and professional? The truth is that in Maranello there is no longer talking about the performance of the SF25, but of the political balance within the garage. And in that field, each word weighs, each gesture counts, each error is amplified. Now that you know all the angles of this episode in Zandvoort, the question is no longer whether it was a simple career accident. The true unknown is what this error implies in the context of the Ferrari ecosystem and Lewis Hamilton's legacy. Therefore, I want to invite you to think beyond the box's wall, beyond the impact against the protection barrier. Do you think that Hamilton can reconstruct his authority and confidence within Ferrari after this error? Or this fall will be the first fissure in a relationship that could become unsustainable with the passage of races? Or is it simply a stumble that will serve as an impulse for an even more powerful resurgence in the following calendar quotes? Leave me your opinion in the comments.